Very quickly, 2 slides on issues in Thessalonian letters. So let's start with 1 Thessalonians. Actually, not a lot of issues in 1 Thessalonians. One question might be, when do we date it? But everybody agrees that it dates the very early 50s. I would say it's the earliest letter, earliest writing of the New Testament written. Some would say Galatians. I would go with 1 Thessalonians. That might be the majority. I'm not sure. What is its relationship to 2 Thessalonians? So 1 Thessalonians is only 1 Thessalonians because it's 5 chapters long, and 2 Thessalonians is shorter. It has 3 chapters, and so the first one is the longest because Paul's letters were originally arranged from longest to shortest. So is it early? Is it late? Wanamaker would say 2 Thessalonians came before 1 Thessalonians, but he's pretty much out on a limb by himself, and so I see no reason not to say that 1 Thessalonians was written before 2 Thessalonians. Feel free to draw your own conclusion. There's not much there. Popular issues, of course, the rapture. The idea of a rapture comes from 1 Thessalonians 4. We who are alive and remain will be caught up. The Latin rapturus, or the kind of rapture, comes from the snatching, raptor, dinosaurs that snatch things. So is this being caught up? Is it literal? Do we come back down? I personally would agree with N.T. Wright and with others that this meeting Christ in the air is not so that we can go off to heaven, but rather so that, as 1 Corinthians 6 says, we may participate in the judgment. Do you not know that you will judge the world? Do you not know that you will judge angels? And so I suspect that in Paul's thinking, this is, and N.T. Wright would say, it's like going out to the edge of the city to meet a king, only to escort the king back into the city. And so we meet Christ in the air, along with the dead in Christ, and then we come back to earth. We have good reason to think that Paul, especially in his earlier letters, and I think probably throughout his letters, saw eternity as on a kind of liberated earth, and transformed earth. Someone might say, well, how does this relate to the tribulation? Well, the tribulation is an interesting construct put together in the 1800s by John Darby, and it's not really found clearly. There is a great tribulation, but there's no "the" on it in Revelation. These are they who have come out of great tribulation. It doesn't say out of the great tribulation in Greek. And it doesn't give a specific timestamp to how long that great tribulation is. There is a 3.5 years mentioned in Revelation, but it never adds the 3.5 to the 3.5 to get 7. That's an inference. So the idea of a 7-year tribulation is ingenious, based out of a missing week from Daniel, I think, a week standing for 7 years. All of this that I'm talking about here is completely not in 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians says nothing about anything along those lines. The impression we get from 1 Thessalonians is that there will be a time when Christ will return, the dead in Christ will rise and meet Jesus in the air, and so will we. We will be caught up to meet him in the air, and then the judgment will commence immediately. That's the implied world of 1 Thessalonians. But again, I'm not going to say that I know exactly how God will bring about the future, because it usually doesn't end up the way you might have expected it to. So there are issues in 1 Thessalonians. Of course, it's implied in 1 Thessalonians 5 that we should not set dates. The best verse, of course, is in Mark 13. No one knows the day or the hour, not even the Son. The precise day of Jesus' return is something we should not try to set. Everybody who's said it so far has been vastly wrong. And so really it's kind of stupid to try to set a date for Jesus' return. Just let it sink in. Every single person has been wrong. Don't do it. Okay, 2 Thessalonians. So there's this question of its relationship to 1 Thessalonians, and I've already suggested that it's probably later than 1 Thessalonians. There is some strong similarity in wording in the Thanksgiving in the first chapter, and so it's possible that 2 Thessalonians kind of was drafted with a copy of 1 Thessalonians around, maybe not. Is it to a different audience. So 1 Thessalonians is clearly written to Gentiles. Some have suggested, well, maybe 2 Thessalonians is written to the Jewish converts of Thessalonica. No evidence, no clear evidence of that that I can find in 2 Thessalonians. It seems likely that the Thessalonian church was overwhelmingly Gentile. But anyway, it's possible. I mean, who's to say? Authorship. I don't know what kind of percentage to give. I think I saw in Raymond Brown once, I think he may have suggested that maybe 40% of scholars, if you count up all the PhDs in New Testament and ask them, do you think Paul wrote 2 Thessalonians or not, maybe 40% might say he didn't. I'm not sure if I'm not at all convinced that that's an accurate percentage. Why would the authorship of 2 Thessalonians be in question by some scholars? Well, it's hard to place. I guess the most obvious thing is to say that 2 Thessalonians was a follow-up to 1 Thessalonians. So if 1 Thessalonians tells them that they need to be ready for Christ's return, then 2 Thessalonians says, well, wait a minute, there will be some indications before this happened. Maybe they shot the gun off before they were supposed to, with a sense that is it already started? Is it already here? For whatever reason, Paul writes them saying, well, there are actually going to be some indications of the day of the Lord. It is a very unique writing among Paul's letters. Nowhere else do we hear about this man of lawlessness. Nowhere else do we hear about this rebellion. Nowhere else do we hear about someone setting up in the temple as God. It's a very unique writing. And I mentioned that it has some similarity of language to 1 Thessalonians. It's not very concrete. Of course, I'm not sure that 1 Thessalonians is either. But this idea of mentioning specific names or specific situations. It does mention if anybody is idle, but it doesn't give a name. Anyway, these are some of the reasons why, over the years, some have questioned whether or not Paul wrote it. Although there's some pretty significant language about forgeries at the end. It would be pretty brazen for someone to say, don't trust a letter unless it has, my signature like this. That would be a pretty bold-faced lie. I mean, I'm open to the possibility of there being pseudonymous writings and it not being a lie. In other words, everybody knows what's going on here. It's a literary genre. But if 2 Thessalonians were not written by Paul, then I think we would almost have to call it a forgery in the sense that it says so explicitly that it's being written by the literal Paul. Anyway, popular issues are how this, how do we fit this language into the old dispensational view of the tribulation? Tribulation, a 7-year period, obviously not mentioned as a 7-year period, but a time of tribulation is mentioned, a rebellion. What is this rebellion? Is it a rebellion of Jews? Is it a rebellion of Christians? The man of lawlessness, because it doesn't say Antichrist, it says man of lawlessness, sets himself up in the temple as God. Is that the literal temple? Is that the figurative temple? Is it the church? Of course, when Paul was writing, there was a temple there, and so you wonder whether this is an allusion to not the final day of the Lord, although things get blurred together like in Mark 13. There's some end times and destruction of Jerusalem times that have kind of gotten blurred together in Mark 13. That could be here as well. So is there a blurring in 2 Thessalonians, like Mark 13, of the day of the Lord when Jerusalem was destroyed with the final day of the Lord when Jesus will return? It's at least a possibility. So who sets himself in the temple as God? Well, certainly Titus destroyed, the Roman, soon-to-be Emperor Titus destroyed the Jerusalem temple. Anyway, these are issues in 1 and 2 Thessalonians, and I'll just leave it at that.